There is a moment, almost imperceptible, when a person stops being readable. Their face softens, their breathing slows, their eyes lose that searching quality everyone else has, and the room changes around them. Even the social predators, the ones who feed on reaction, sense it instantly and step back. You've felt this. You've watched someone walk into a chaotic room and somehow the chaos parted around them. They didn't fight it. They didn't argue with it. They simply weren't available to it. You've also been the one others tried to read and couldn't. You were called intense, too quiet, too perceptive, intimidating. You were told to soften, to smile more, to explain yourself, to be easier. And somewhere along the way, you started apologizing for the very depth that was your inheritance. Carl Jung spent 40 years studying this exact phenomenon in his clinical work, and he found something that almost no one in modern life is told. The trait you were taught to hide is the trait that once made human beings untouchable. It is older than language. It is older than civilization, and it is still living quietly underneath the performance you've been running for most of your life. Today, you are going to remember what you actually are. Sit with that line for a moment, because Jung did not write it lightly. He wrote it after 4 decades of watching intelligent, sensitive, perceptive people slowly disappear under the weight of other people's expectations. He watched them shrink. He watched them explain themselves into invisibility. He watched them apologize for the very awareness that made them rare. And then, in a smaller number of his patients, he watched something else happen. He watched them stop. He watched them withdraw the performance. He watched them go quiet in a way that was not depression, not withdrawal, not avoidance, but something the ancient world would have recognized immediately. A return, a remembering, the reclamation of a trait so old that we no longer have a clean word for it in modern language. The closest word is composure. The truer word is sovereignty. And the most honest word, the one Jung circled around in his later journals, is untouchability. Not the untouchability of armor, not the untouchability of coldness. The untouchability of a person whose internal world is no longer available for negotiation. That is what you are about to recover. And the reason your quiet presence already unsettles certain people, the reason your stillness already makes the loud ones nervous, is that some part of this trait never actually died in you. It was buried, but it was never lost. You have been carrying the original signal underneath the performance, and the people who depend on your reactivity have been sensing it the entire time. That is why they keep trying to pull you back into explaining yourself. They are not threatened by your loudness. They are threatened by what they sense underneath your silence. If these ideas resonate with you, hit that subscribe button for more top-tier content. Also, drop an untouchable in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. Long before language, long before social hierarchy, long before any of the games modern people play with each other, there was a single trait that separated those who survived from those who were consumed. It was not strength. Strength was loud, and loud things were tracked. It was not speed, because speed could be outlasted. It was not intelligence in the modern sense, because pure intelligence without composure is just panic that calculates. The trait was something older. The ancestral trait was the absence of need. Predators of every kind read need before they read size. They read it in the eyes, they read it in the breath, they read it in the small, frantic micro-movements of a creature trying to be approved of by its environment. And the human beings who survived, the ones whose lineage you are quite literally descended from, possessed a nervous system that could go still under pressure. They did not perform for the forest. They did not negotiate with the threat. They simply became unreadable, and unreadable things were left alone. Carl Jung, working thousands of years later in a Swiss clinic, observed the modern echo of this in his most psychologically composed patients. He noticed that they shared one feature and only one. Their internal world was not for sale through conversation. They did not give it away to be liked. They did not trade it for approval. They did not spill it across the room hoping someone would validate it. And as a direct result, they carried a kind of gravity that the more reactive patients did not. People oriented around them without being asked to. This is the ancestral signal you have been suppressing. Every time you over-explained yourself to seem accessible, you sent the signal that your inner world was for sale. Every time you softened your presence to make a smaller person comfortable, you sent the signal that your composure was negotiable. Every time you apologized for your depth, you sent the signal that even you did not believe you had the right to it. The signal still went out, but it went out reversed. And the people around you, especially the ones who feed on reactivity, learn to expect a version of you that does not actually exist. That is the first thing you are going to stop doing. Not loudly, not dramatically. You are simply going to stop being available to it. There is a strange paradox at the center of modern social life, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The more a person performs accessibility, the less actual presence they carry. The more they explain themselves, the less weight their words hold. The more they soften to be liked, the more invisible they become to the people whose respect they actually wanted. You have lived this paradox. You were trained into it before you had the language to refuse it. Somewhere in your earliest years, you learned that your natural state, the quiet, observing, internally rich state that came easily to you, made other people uncomfortable. So you adapted. You learned to fill silences you would have preferred to leave alone. You learned to laugh at things you found uninteresting. You learned to brighten your face into expressions that did not match your inner weather. You learned to translate yourself constantly into a simpler version that the room could metabolize without effort. And the cost was enormous, though it was paid in a currency no one taught you to count. The cost was your sovereignty. Jung wrote that the persona, the social mask we present to the world, is necessary in small doses but catastrophic in large ones. When the persona overgrows the self, the person becomes a kind of well-dressed ghost. They function, they smile, they produce. But the part of them that knew silence, that knew stillness, that knew the dignified weight of not explaining, that part starts to atrophy. And here is the part nobody tells you. The atrophy is felt by others. The people around you, even the unconscious ones, sense when they are talking to a performance instead of a presence. They may not name it. They may even enjoy the performance because it is easy on them, but they do not respect it. Respect is reserved, almost universally, for the people who do not seem to need it. This is why the colleague who barely speaks is the one whose opinion is awaited. This is why the person who does not chase the room ends up commanding it. This is why a certain kind of quiet, the right kind, makes louder people nervous in a way they cannot articulate. The performance you inherited was not your fault. You were a child who needed connection, and you adapted. But you are not a child anymore, and the performance is no longer protecting you. It is now actively preventing the trait that would protect you from coming back online. The performance and the sovereignty cannot coexist. One of them has to go, and the work of the next few minutes is to make sure the right one stays. Jung observed that the most psychologically composed patients shared one feature, but he also observed its opposite. The most exhausted, the most fragmented, the most quietly miserable people in his practice shared a different feature, one that hides in plain sight in modern life. They were constantly available to be interpreted, available to be reached, available to explain themselves at any hour, to anyone, for any reason. They had no inner room with a closed door. Every part of them was a hallway, and anyone could walk through. And the cost of being that available, Jung noticed, was not just exhaustion, it was a slow erosion of the self. Because the self, the actual self, is not built in public. It is built in private, in stillness, in the quiet hours where no one is watching and no one needs to be performed for. When you spend your life being constantly readable, constantly explainable, constantly accessible, you never give the self a chance to thicken. It stays thin. It stays porous. It stays at the mercy of whoever decides to interpret it that day. You know this cost. You have felt it. You have ended conversations where you said all the right things and walked away feeling oddly hollowed out, as if you had given something away that you could not name. You have left social gatherings where you were warm and witty and present and gone home feeling like a stranger to yourself. You have answered messages, explained your choices, defended your decisions, softened your tone, and at the end of the day, wondered why you felt so far from the person you used to be. This is the hidden cost of unbroken availability. It is not just energy, it is identity. And shadow psychology, the part of Jung's work that most people never get to, tells us something crucial about this. The trait you suppress does not disappear. It moves into the shadow, it waits, it pressurizes. And until you reintegrate it, you will feel a low, constant tension, the tension of a person whose composure is trapped underneath their compliance. Inner stillness was never something you needed to acquire. It is something you have been actively suppressing. The work is not to build it, the work is to stop strangling it. In the deepest layer of Jung's archetypal psychology, there is a figure that almost no one talks about, because it does not photograph well and it does not make for dramatic storytelling. It is not the warrior. It is not the lover. It is not the sage who speaks in riddles. It is the one who simply does not move when the room expects movement. Call it the inner stillness archetype. Call it the composed one. Call it, if you prefer the older language, the one who has remembered. Every culture has a version of this figure. The monk who does not flinch, the elder who does not argue, the mountain that the storm breaks against, and in every culture, the figure is treated with a specific kind of respect, the respect that is reserved for the unreadable. Because unreadability, in the archetypal sense, is not coldness, it is fullness. It is a person so complete in themselves that they do not require the room to confirm them. And here is what Jung understood that modern self-help has almost entirely lost. This archetype is not a personality type. It is not something certain lucky people are born with and others are not. It is a developmental destination. It is what a human being becomes when they stop outsourcing their internal state to the people around them. You have access to this archetype right now. You always have. The reason it has not fully come online is that you have been feeding the opposite pattern for years, the pattern of constant micro-adjustment to other people's energy. Every time you scanned a room to see if you were welcome, you fed the readable self. Every time you adjusted your face to match the mood of someone who did not deserve that adjustment, you fed the readable self. Every time you explained a decision that did not require explanation, you fed the readable self. And the stillness archetype, the one that would have made you untouchable, was left to starve in the corner of your psyche. The good news is that archetypes do not die from neglect. They wait. They wait with extraordinary patience. And the moment you begin to feed them, even slightly, they come back online with a force that surprises you. The first feeding is the smallest. It is simply this. The next time someone expects a reaction from you, you do not give it. You do not argue. You do not explain. You do not perform composure. You simply remain. That single act, repeated, begins to reweave you. Sovereignty is not declared. It is restored, one withheld reaction at a time. There is a moment in this work that almost everyone resists because it feels, at first, like loss. It is the moment you begin to withdraw the performance, and the people around you notice. Some of them will be confused. Some of them will be irritated. A few of them, the ones whose relationship with you was secretly built on your reactivity, will become hostile. This is not a failure of the work. This is the work succeeding. When you stop being endlessly available to be read, the people who depended on your readability lose their main tool for managing you. They will try, often unconsciously, to provoke the old version back into existence. They will say things designed to make you defend yourself. They will offer interpretations of your behavior that are slightly off, hoping you will rush to correct them. They will become more dramatic, more demanding, more emotionally noisy, all in an attempt to restore the dynamic where you were the one who explained and they were the one who judged. And here is where most people fail. Most people, faced with this pressure, fold. They explain, they soften, they apologize, they reassure. And the moment they do, the entire restoration collapses, and they are back inside the performance, sometimes for years before they get another chance. You are not going to do that. You are going to learn what Jung called the dignity of the unanswered question. You are going to learn that not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every interpretation deserves a correction. Not every emotional escalation deserves a matching response. You are going to learn that silence, the right kind of silence, is not avoidance. It is a complete sentence. There is a paradox at the center of human power, and you need to feel it in your body before you can use it. The moment you stop trying to convince others of your composure, you actually possess it. The moment you stop performing your depth becomes obvious. The moment you stop explaining your stillness becomes the room. This is the inversion that shadow psychology was always pointing at. The traits you tried hardest to project were the ones you were furthest from embodying. The traits you stop projecting, stop defending, stop explaining, are the ones that finally become real. Withdrawing the performance is not a loss. It is the first honest act of your adult life, and the people who matter, the ones whose respect you actually wanted, will not leave. They will lean in, because for the first time, there is something solid to lean against. Now we arrive at the part that, once you embody it, you cannot easily go back from. There is a frame, a mental and energetic posture that the strongest people Jung studied all eventually arrived at, and it is the frame that produces what the ancient world called untouchability. It is not invulnerability, it is not coldness, it is not detachment from caring, it is something far more precise. It is the recognition that your internal state is not a public utility. The untouchable frame begins with a single internal declaration, made not out loud but at the level of identity. The declaration is this: my composure is not on the table, not in this conversation, not in this conflict, not in this provocation, not in this room. My composure is the ground I stand on, and I do not negotiate the ground. From that single internal stance, everything reorganizes. Your face stops flickering through micro-expressions designed to manage other people's moods. Your breath stops shortening in response to other people's urgency. Your words stop racing to fill silences that were never yours to fill. You become, in a very literal sense, harder to read, not because you are hiding, but because there is nothing performative left to read. What people see when they look at you is the actual self, and the actual self is always more dignified than the performance was. This is where Carl Jung's clinical work converges with the deepest currents of ancient philosophy. The Stoics arrived at the same destination from a different door. They called it the inner citadel. The contemplative traditions called it the still center. Jung called it individuation, and the modern language we are recovering for it is sovereignty. Different doors, same room, and the room is yours. It has been yours the entire time. You were just trained to live in the hallway. There is one practical thing you can begin doing immediately, and it is the thing Jung quietly asked many of his patients in their final sessions. He would ask them, in different words depending on the patient, a version of this question: whose approval exactly are you still organizing your life around? And he would watch, in the silence that followed, as the patient finally saw the architecture of their compliance. You can ask yourself the same question now. Whose approval are you still organizing your composure around? Whose comfort are you still softening your depth for? Whose interpretation of you are you still racing to correct? The answer will name itself, and the naming is the beginning of the withdrawal. Once the architecture is visible, it can be dismantled. And once it is dismantled, what stands underneath is the trait you were born with, the trait your ancestors carried, the trait that made human beings untouchable long before any of this. Inner stillness, quiet sovereignty, the composed self that does not need to be understood to exist. There is a particular kind of person who finishes a video like this and feels for the first time in a long time a strange and quiet recognition. Not excitement, not motivation, recognition. The recognition of a self that has been waiting underneath the performance, patient as a mountain, for permission to come back. If that is what you are feeling right now, you are not imagining it, you are remembering. The journey we have walked through, from the ancestral signal to the performance you inherited, to the hidden cost of unbroken availability, to the stillness archetype, to the withdrawal of the performance, to the untouchable frame, is not a list of techniques. It is a restoration. You are not learning to become someone new. You are stopping the daily acts of suppression that were keeping you from becoming who you already are. Carl Jung's forgotten truth was never complicated. It was that the strongest people he ever met were the ones who had stopped negotiating their internal world in public. They had reclaimed inner stillness, sovereignty, composure, not as ideas, but as the daily ground of how they moved through the world. They became, in the truest sense, hard to read, not because they were hiding, but because there was no longer anything performed to display. The performance was retired, the self remained, and the self, fully present, is always quietly authoritative. So before you close this, drop one word in the comments. Drop the word remembered, not as a slogan, as a marker, as a small private signal to yourself that today is the day you stopped apologizing for the depth that was always your inheritance. And if any of this reached the part of you that has been waiting to be reached, subscribe. This space is not for the loud. It is not for the reactive. It is for the rare ones who are ready to stop being readable and start being real, who are willing to do the slow, dignified work of inner sovereignty when the rest of the world is selling noise. You belong here. And whatever you do, don't stop now. The video on your screen matters more than you think. It is the next step in the same restoration we just began, and the timing of it is not accidental. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. I'll see you there. See what others miss. Know what others fear. Become who others can't.